Welcome to the AIBE 21 Model Paper 30. This video features 100 practice questions covering 19 subjects, including BNS, BNSS, BSA, CPC, constitutional law, family law, ADR, and more. Each question includes answer keys and detailed explanations to help you prepare. Question 1 asks, which section of the Arbitration Act 1996 deals with the appointment of arbitrators when parties cannot agree? The correct answer is C. Section 11. Section 11 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996 allows for court intervention for arbitrator appointments when parties fail to agree. For question 2, we look at the Bharatiya Saksha Adhiniyam 2023. Under which provision are dying declarations admissible? The correct answer is B. Section 26, which makes a dying declaration admissible, allowing statements by a deceased person about the cause of death or surrounding circumstances. Question 3 asks, which environmental case prominently used continuing mandamus as a PIL remedy? The correct answer is B. Vineet Narain v. Union of India, 1997. In this case, the court supervised the investigation through ongoing directions to the agencies. Next, question 4 covers the new legal codes. Cheating, formerly Section 420 IPC, is now punishable under which section of the BNS 2023? The correct answer is A. Section 318 of the BNS 2023. Moving to question 5. Section 9 of the Code of Civil Procedure 1908 deals with which subject? The answer is C. Jurisdiction of civil courts to try suits of civil nature, stating that they may try all such suits except those expressly or impliedly barred. Question 6 asks, under BNS 2023, which section punishes the offense of a terrorist act? The correct answer is A. Section 113. This section defines and punishes a, quote, terrorist act, which addresses acts threatening the unity, integrity, and security of India. For question 7, on whom was the burden of proving a fact, especially within the knowledge of any person under Section 106 of the Evidence Act? The correct answer is A. On that person. The burden of proving such a fact lies on the individual whose knowledge it is within. Question 8 asks, on what grounds delegated legislation is subject to judicial review? The answer is A. Excessive delegation and ultra vires the parent statute. This means the legislation goes beyond the powers conferred by the parent statute. Under BNSS 2023, what is the maximum period of police custody during investigation? The correct answer for question 9 is A. 15 days, in parts within the first 40 or 60 days, depending on the offense. Question 10 addresses punishment for professional misconduct under Section 35 of the Advocates Act 1961. The punishment may include C. Reprimand, suspension, or removal from the state roll. Next, question 11. Which section governs retrenchment compensation under the Industrial Disputes Act 1947? The correct answer is D. Section 25F, which lays down the conditions precedent to retrenchment, including notice and compensation payment. Question 12 asks, under which Act of Parliament the National Green Tribunal was established? The answer is D. National Green Tribunal Act 2010. This act provided for the effective and expeditious disposal of environmental cases. For question 13, Article 14 of the Constitution embodies which doctrine? The correct answer is A. Equality before law and equal protection of laws, guaranteeing both formal and substantive equality. Finally, in question 14, Mohan attempts to kill Ravi by firing a gun but misses. Which offense has Mohan committed? The correct answer is B. Attempt to murder under BNS Section 109. Restitution of conjugal rights under the Hindu Marriage Act 1955 is governed by which section? The correct answer is D. Section 9. This section allows an aggrieved spouse to seek a decree for the resumption of cohabitation. Question 16 asks, in which English case the doctrine of strict liability was first laid down? The correct answer is B. Rylands v. Fletcher, 1868. This established that keeping a dangerous thing in a non-natural use of land makes one liable if it escapes and causes harm. Under the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023, which section punishes the offense of murder? The correct answer for question 17 is C. Section 103, replacing the former Section 302 of the IPC. Question 18 asks, which provision of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023 deals with snatching as a distinct offense? The correct answer is D, Section 304, recognizing the sudden, quick, or forcible seizure of movable property as separate from theft. Publishing or transmitting obscene material in electronic form is punishable under which section of the IT Act 2000? For question 19, the correct answer is D, Section 67, with enhanced penalties for repeat offenses. Question 20 looks at the Bharatiya Saksha Adhiniyam 2023. Under which section are electronic and digital records recognized? The correct answer is D, Section 61, treating them on par with documentary evidence. Section 482 of the Code of Criminal Procedure 1973 deals with which power of the High Court? For question 21, the answer is A, inherent powers to prevent abuse of process of court and to secure the ends of justice. Question 22 asks for the case that prominently recognized the doctrine of legitimate expectation in Indian administrative law. The correct answer is A, Union of India versus Hindustan Development Corporation, 1993. Under which doctrine, evolved by the Supreme Court, may frivolous PILs be dismissed with costs? The correct answer to question 23 is C, Doctrine against Publicity Interest Litigation, curbing misuse of public interest litigation. Question 24 addresses the Factories Act 1948. What are the maximum daily working hours for an adult worker? The correct answer is C, 9 hours, with a weekly limit of 48 hours. The conditions for a valid Hindu marriage under the Hindu Marriage Act 1955 are enumerated in which section? For question 25, the correct answer is C, Section 5, listing conditions like monogamy and age requirements. Question 26 asks for the meaning of the maxim volenti non fit injuria under the law of torts. The answer is A, to a willing person, no injury is done, meaning consent to risk negates damage claims. Under the Transfer of Property Act 1882, the rule against perpetuities is contained in which section? The correct answer for question 27 is A, Section 14, restricting the creation of interests that vest beyond the permitted period. Question 28. A sale of immovable property of value 100 rupees or more must be effected by what under the Transfer of Property Act 1882? The correct answer is B, registered instrument, as mandated by Section 54. Finally, for this section, question 29 asks, in which part of the Constitution the directive principles of state policy are enumerated? The correct answer is C, Part 4, which covers Articles 36 to 51. Question 30. Under the Hindu Succession Act 1956, daughters were given equal co-parsonary rights by the amendment of which year? The correct answer is A, 2005. The Hindu Succession Amendment Act 2005 granted daughters equal rights as co-parsoners by birth. For question 31, heads of income for income tax are enumerated under which section of the Income Tax Act 1961? The correct answer is D, Section 14, which lists the 5 heads of income: salaries, house property, business or profession, capital gains, and other sources. Question 32. The rule that an advocate cannot represent both the state and the accused reflects which principle? The correct answer is B, conflict of interest. This ethical rule prevents an advocate from representing conflicting interests. Next, question 33 asks, under which section of the Indian Evidence Act 1872 is an accomplice a competent witness? The correct answer is B, Section 133, which allows conviction based even on uncorroborated accomplice testimony. Moving on to question 34. Under BNSS 2023, trial in absentia of a proclaimed offender is permitted under which section? The correct answer is D, Section 356. This permits trials for absconding proclaimed offenders when there's no immediate prospect of arrest. For question 35, dishonor of check for insufficiency of funds is punishable under which section of the Negotiable Instruments Act 1881? The answer is D, Section 138, provided the statutory conditions of notice are met. Question 36 asks, which case recognized the, quote, polluter pays principle? The correct answer is B, Indian Council for Enviro-Legal Action versus Union of India, which established the liability of polluters to remedy environmental harm. Next, question 37. Public interest litigation derives its constitutional foundation primarily from which articles? The correct answer is C, Articles 32 and 226, enabling the Supreme Court and High Courts to enforce fundamental rights. Question 38. Under the BSA 2023, which section contains the presumption regarding the genuineness of certified electronic records? The answer is A. Section 81, simplifying the admission of electronic evidence. For question 39, damages for breach of contract are awarded under which section of the Indian Contract Act 1872? The correct answer is D. Section 73, which governs compensation for losses arising from breach of contract. Question 40 asks for the case where the right to privacy was declared a fundamental right. The correct answer is C.K.S. Puttaswamy v. Union of India, declaring privacy a right under Article 21. Under the Advocates Act 1961, professional misconduct is dealt with by whom? For question 41, the answer is D. Bar Council Disciplinary Committee as per Section 35. Question 42 asks which schedule of the Constitution contains anti-defection provisions? The correct answer is A. 10th Schedule, introduced by the 52nd Amendment to prevent political defections. Under CRPC 1973, what is the maximum sentence a magistrate of the first class may pass? The correct answer for question 43 is A. Imprisonment up to 3 years and fine up to 10,000 rupees, as stated in Section 29. Finally, question 44. Specific performance under the Specific Relief Act 1963 is a rule, not discretionary, post which amendment? The answer is C. 2018 Amendment, which made specific performance a statutory right, subject to limited exceptions. The doctrine of res judicata is codified under Section 11 of the CPC 1908. This section bars the relitigation of matters that have already been finally decided between the same parties. Under the Indian Contract Act 1872, the doctrine of frustration of contract is contained in Section 56. This section states that an agreement to do an act that becomes impossible or unlawful becomes void. Maintenance of wife, children, and parents was governed under Section 125 of the CRPC 1973. This provided a summary remedy to prevent destitution for those unable to maintain themselves. Article 32 empowers the Supreme Court to issue writs for the enforcement of fundamental rights, such as habeas corpus and mandamus. The doctrine of competens competens under the Arbitration Act 1996 is embodied in Section 16. This empowers the arbitral tribunal to rule on its own jurisdiction. Anticipatory bail under the BNSS 2023 is provided under Section 482. This allows a person anticipating arrest to seek pre-arrest bail from the court. Temporary injunctions and interlocutory orders are governed by Order 39 of the CPC 1908. This enables courts to preserve the subject matter of a suit pending its disposal. Under the CGST Act 2017, registration is mandatory once aggregate turnover exceeds 20 lakh rupees in most states and 10 lakh in special category states. The BNSS 2023 introduces mandatory videography of search and seizure under Section 105. Enhancing transparency in the investigative process. Confessions made before a police officer are inadmissible under Section 23 of the Bharatiya Saksha Adhiniyam 2023. This safeguards against coerced or unreliable confessions. Under the LARR Act 2013, the social impact assessment provisions are contained in Chapter 2. This requires a study and consultation before land acquisition. Article 368 empowers Parliament to amend the Constitution by way of addition, variation, or repeal, subject to the basic structure doctrine. An appeal from an original decree under the Code of Civil Procedure 1908 is provided under Section 96. This is the first appeal from a decree passed by a court exercising original jurisdiction. A police officer arresting a person without a warrant must produce them before a magistrate within 24 hours, excluding the time for the journey, as per Article 22 and the BNSS. The current legislation governing land acquisition in India is the Right to Fair Compensation and Transparency in Land Acquisition Act 2013, replacing the Colonial Act of 1894. The general exception under the BNS 2023 for the right of private defense of body and property is found in Sections 34 to 44. Order 7 Rule 11 of the Code of Civil Procedure 1908 specifically addresses the procedural aspect of the rejection of plaint, typically for issues like disclosing no cause of action. Under the Patents Act 1970, the term of every patent granted is 20 years from the date of filing of the application, as per Section 53. The Supreme Court relaxed the rule of locus standi for public interest litigations in the landmark case of S.P. Gupta versus Union of India. According to Section 25 of the Indian Contract Act 1872, an agreement without consideration is generally void, subject to specific exceptions mentioned in that section. Under Section 5 of the Special Marriage Act 1954, a notice period of 30 days is the minimum required before a registered marriage can be solemnized. The doctrine of res gestae, which makes facts forming part of the same transaction relevant, is recognized under Section 4 of the Bharatiya Saksha Adhiniyam 2023. Section 3 of the Income Tax Act 1961 defines the, quote, previous year as the financial year immediately preceding the assessment year for which income is taxed. Criminal conspiracy under the Indian Penal Code 1860 is defined in Section 120A and punishable under Section 120B, covering agreements to commit illegal acts. Section 2, KKK of the Industrial Disputes Act 1947 contains the definition for layoff relating to the inability or failure of an employer to provide work. Section 151 of the CPC 1908 saves the inherent powers of the civil court to ensure justice or prevent abuse of the court process. Summons cases under the Code of Criminal Procedure 1973 are tried under Chapter 20, which outlines the procedure for minor offenses. The presumption that a check was issued for legally enforceable debt under the Negotiable Instruments Act 1881 is established by Section 139. Instant triple talaq, or talaq-e-bidat, was held unconstitutional in the landmark case of Shayara Bano versus Union of India in 2017. The registration of an FIR in a cognizable case under the Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita 2023 is addressed in Section 173. Interim measures by a court in arbitration proceedings are provided under Section 9 of the 1996 Act. This empowers courts to grant interim protection before, during, or after arbitral proceeding. Under the Indian Evidence Act 1872, the term fact in issue is defined in Section 3, which is the interpretation clause for key terms. Article 21 of the Constitution of India guarantees the fundamental right to life and personal liberty, a right broadly interpreted by the courts. The Zero FIR finds statutory recognition in the BNSS 2023 under the proviso to Section 173, allowing police stations to register FIRs regardless of territorial jurisdiction. An appeal from an order is provided under Section 104 Red with Order XLIII of the CPC 1908, listing the specific orders that are appealable. The doctrine of basic structure was propounded in the landmark case of Kesavananda Bharati versus State of Kerala, establishing limits on Parliament's amending power. The principle of separate legal entity of a company was established in Solomon versus Solomon & Co., Limited, treating a company as legally distinct from its members. The doctrine of absolute liability was propounded in India in MC Mehta versus Union of India, making enterprises strictly liable for harm caused by hazardous activities. The President of India is elected by an electoral college consisting of elected members of Parliament and state legislative assemblies, as per Article 54. GST is a tax based on the 101st Constitutional Amendment Act, 2016, which introduced Article 246A for the Unified Tax Framework. Identity theft under the Information Technology Act 2000 is punishable under Section 66C, covering fraudulent use of digital identification. Article 19.2 permits the state to impose reasonable restrictions on freedom of speech and expression on grounds such as public order and security. Marriages solemnized under the Indian Christian Marriage Act 1872 must comply with Sections 4 and 5, governing the persons and manner of solemnization. Section 89 of the CPC 1908 provides for alternative dispute resolution mechanisms like arbitration and mediation to settle disputes outside court. An advocate is prohibited from advertising their profession under Rule 36, Section IV, Chapter 2, Part 6 of the BCI Rules, which bans solicitation of work. Question 90 asks about the minimum number of members required to form a private company under the Companies Act 2013. The correct answer is 2, as stated in Section 3 of the Act. Under the Trademarks Act 1999, the initial registration of a trademark is valid for 10 years and is renewable indefinitely for successive 10-year periods, as per Section 25. Regarding Section 100 of the CPC 1908, a second appeal to the High Court lies only where the case involves a substantial question of law. Question 93. Under the Motor Vehicles Act 1988, no-fault liability claims are dealt with under Section 140, providing fixed compensation regardless of negligence. Under the Consumer Protection Act 2019, a complaint can be filed before the District Commission where the value of the claim does not exceed 50 lakh rupees. The Code on Wages 2019 consolidates 4 earlier central enactments, including the Minimum Wages Act and the Payment of Wages Act. Divorce by mutual consent under the Hindu Marriage Act 1955 is provided for in Section 13b, allowing spouses to file a joint petition after the statutory period. An application to set aside a domestic arbitral award under the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996 is filed under Section 34, which outlines the limited grounds for this application. Summary suits for recovery on negotiable instruments under the CPC 1908 are filed under Order 37. This order enables speedy recovery in suits on these instruments and liquidated debts. The new offense of organized crime is introduced under Section 111 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023, covering continuing unlawful activity by crime syndicates. The principle audi alterum partem under administrative law signifies the rule that no person shall be condemned unheard, a core rule of natural justice.